Welcome to the eCommerce Growth Show, brought to you by Segmentify, the fast, lean learning machine, the fastest learning, most revenue-generating personalization platform for e-commerce.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the eCommerce Growth Show. You'll be really pleased to know that I got myself some brownie points over the weekend with my other boss. Most of the guys will know who I'm talking about, and it was her birthday, so I actually thought about it properly this time, and there was this picture that she really loved by this artist called Maria van Tintelen, and I managed to get her to commission kind of a similar piece of work that she did that she really liked. And so birthday morning came down, she went to the lounge and she saw this picture that I had commissioned in the lounge. So she was like super chuffed. And because she couldn't go back to Ireland to see her parents, which she normally does over this period, for obvious reasons. So and then we went down to Charmouth. You guys would be familiar with that place. So it's quite a famous fossil hunting beach. And I took the kids down and mucked about a bit, tried to socially distance fossil hunting, which wasn't too bad actually. And I'm now staring at the collection of fossils in front of me. Got some calcite, a couple of ammonites, usual sort of thing. So yeah, all in all, good weekend. But I hope you guys are well. And as you know, this series is all about bringing fresh thought leadership to you from various experts around the world. And now today, got a fantastic chat with a guy called Kevin Urrutia. And he's actually based out of New York City and runs a e-commerce agency there called Voy Media. He's a former Silicon Valley software programmer and actually runs 3 businesses. A very clever lad. I'm really looking forward to speaking to him. And so he started with a company called Made Sailors, which is a cleaning business, which is still going now, and that kind of runs itself. And he's also got a luxury travel brand, which actually I think is in the UK as well, called Chester Travels. So that he's the man behind that. And obviously he's got Voy Media as well. So yeah, really talented guy. He's a podcaster too, and he hosts a show called the Digital Marketing Fast Lane. So check that out as well. Gives you loads of insight into the world of marketing. And I was also told that it's his birthday today, 31 years young. So happy birthday, Kevin!
Thank you. Thanks, Phil.
Hey, not at all. Welcome to the show, man.
Awesome. Yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, for sure. So why don't we start then? I mean, obviously, running 3 businesses. I remember when I was chatting to you before, it's like, I'm just so in awe of people like yourselves who managed to do this stuff. Why don't you tell the guys how your entrepreneurial journey began?
Yeah, so my journey began, so I grew up in New York, so Long Island. Basically,
Yeah.
how it began was growing up, me and my brother, we would sort of do a lot of like construction work with my dad. And then growing up, we would basically just do this like at night or weekends. Like it's kind of like a thing that we were just like, if we're not at school or studying, we would just be doing this. So like we didn't have any like a chance to like kind of go out or play with friends because at the time we're just like, hey, like you guys need to work, and my parents needed money. So then my dad had like a side business just doing things like on the weekends at night. And I guess that's sort of like, at least for me, that's sort of where that entrepreneurial sort of journey began, because like I was growing up with it and my parents just did it without sort of like, my dad didn't speak any English. He just kind of just did it. And then for me, that was kind of like the overarching of like, hey, just go and do it. And that sort of, this also led into me kind of not wanting to do stuff with my hands, because I was like, this is a lot of hard labor. And I was like, I don't want to be doing this. So then I was like, yeah. So I was like, I need to study and go to college, because like I see the pain. I'm like 14 or 15 just doing construction work. I was like, this is not what I want my life to be. So that's sort of when I started doing more computer stuff, and I was like playing games, and I was like, oh, like, I really love like this game stuff. Like it's pretty interesting how you can program something at that time. Like I had like a Dell compact that I just got with like dial-up internet. I was like, so fascinated by that, and I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And I picked up like HTML programming books. I picked up like C++ books, and then at that time, I was reading like TechCrunch. I'm not sure if you know like TechCrunch. Like that like website was like, I was addicted to it. It's like kind of when you discover something for the first time, you're just like, I gotta read the next article. I gotta read the next article.
Wow.
Like
Man, amazing.
that was what made me like sort of saying like, oh wow, I need to do a startup. And at that time, like startups, like everybody's raising tons and tons of money. And I was like, the dream was to go out to Silicon Valley, right? So that was something that I've always had in the back of my mind. So I went to college and I did computer science, because that's sort of like, oh, this is what I want to do. And it sort of
man. Beautiful.
it sort of does that. And then After college, I moved out to California for the first time. I've never been there. I just went out there and didn't know anybody, but that sort of dream of starting my own thing. And
Yeah.
the question I always get is like, oh, like, were you scared? And I was like, yes, of course I was scared. But then like my experience growing up was like
Mm.
very, like my parents came here when they were like 16 or 17, not knowing English. And I was like, okay, like, why am I scared to go to a place inside the United States?
Yeah.
I have a degree and this is the dream I want, right? Where they came here because like they had to come, right? They needed a better life. So
Yeah.
that sort of like mentality has always kind of like been with me where like I get scared, but then I always like look back at my family experience. I'm just like, oh, like their situation is
Yeah.
scarier. Like
Yeah.
I'm doing
Yeah.
this because I want to do it. Um,
Yeah.
so that's always kind of driven me to do things and
Yeah.
going to Silicon Valley, that invigorated my like experience to do my own company. When I was there, it was like the mecca. Like
Mm.
everything I read on
Yeah.
programming, tech people, everybody's talking about startups. Like I was
Yeah.
rose in that startup space. So like every weekend I was competing on like hackathons, like 48-hour marathons of coding. We even won like startup weekend in San Francisco, and then we went out to San Diego to pitch like Qualcomm Ventures for an app that we made. It was like the thing
Amazing.
I wanted. It was like so different
Yeah.
than back in Long
Yeah.
Island in New
Yeah.
York,
Yeah.
where it was like just a different experience. But then
Yeah.
when I was working there, I was working at Mint.com, and then I was went to work for another company called Zarly, and
Yeah.
that was like at Zarly was like a true startup experience, like working with
Yeah.
super smart people. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Working from like 8 to 10 p.m. at night. That was like at that age, that's what I wanted. I was like, this is like
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly what I want, and that sort of made me even more excited to do my own thing. And then I was there for about 2.5 years, about 2 years actually. And then I came back home, and then that's when I kind of started Maid Sailors, my first cleaning company. I wanted to do something, and the reason why I started that cleaning company was because at Zarly, we're like a kind of like a home services provider where you feel like you say you're a cleaner, you're a plumber, or you're like some sort of like some sort of painter, right? You can list your
Right.
services on there, and
Yeah.
on there, I was like seeing that a lot of the cleaners had a lot of business because it's like very recurring, and I was like, and at that time, I was learning about SEO and sort of like marketing in general.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because like in between that sort of journey, I was building apps and websites.
Right.
But my biggest issue was that I could never get customers. I was like, oh, cool, like I can build a cool app because that's what I was taught in like reading all these articles. Like, hey, if you're a cool app, people will come magically find you. And I
Yeah.
realized that was not it. So I had to like go into like learn what is SEO, what is like product market fit, how do you know if someone wants your stuff, and then I
Yeah.
was like, oh wow, like cleaning is like an industry that's obviously very old.
Yeah.
But like there's so much demand for it, especially when I was like coming back.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, oh whoa, like there's so much demand, and I'm looking at like the results on Google, and I'm like, oh wow, these websites are like really old. Like you can't book online, you can't call to book, and it's like you need to go to the person's home to do a price evaluation. And
Yeah.
me, I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. I just want to be able to, so using my tech experience, I want someone to book online, and we'll give you a flat rate pricing, and
Yeah.
90% of the time will be right, 10% of the time it will be wrong, but that will sort of help
Yeah.
the overall
Yeah.
process of
That's so cool, though, isn't it? That's
yeah,
so cool how you just. I was just going to ask you actually, like, was there a niche or something? But you've just answered the question. So you found a niche. You realised that the cleaning was really in demand, and then you looked at the kind of historic kind of stature of those companies and thought, hold on a minute, I can do this so much better. And then of course you then brought your tech into that space. And I'm just looking at the website now, and it's got all the latest tech on it.
yeah.
And so that's so cool. That's so cool. So how did it expand out, to the other ones? How did it then go to Voy Media and the other business you were talking about?
So yeah, basically so I was doing the maid company for a
Mm.
good, for my first year. I was telling people I was working from home.
Yeah.
Literally the first year was just learning how to get traffic. Like
Yeah.
how do you find people to use your services? How do you do SEO? How do
Yeah.
you deal with customer service? How do you like everything you need to learn about a business? What is
Yeah.
email marketing? What is MailChimp? How do you send email newsletters? I remember in the beginning, like you're
Yeah.
scared to send your first newsletter because like, oh my god, are people gonna spam like email you back and they're pissed off, right? Yeah, that first time is always the scariest, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
and then eventually you're like, oh wow, this is actually
Nobody cares now.
yeah, now it's like you're pressing that button like 10 times a
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, MailChimp's like,
Yeah.
like you're sitting too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah. So that was like a good first year of like truly learning marketing, and then that's when I
Hmm.
realized, oh wow, like
Hmm.
it's great that I'm building all these products, and I realized like the marketing is so important of all this stuff. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what product you have, like how do you
No.
bring customers is probably the number one thing for any business. And then I was reading all these books, but basically at that time I hired my first employee.
Yeah.
and then he was working with me in my home in Long Island, and then
Yeah.
just help with that sort of like customer service aspect of it, of like booking cleanings,
Yeah.
confirming cleanings. Eventually, we grew to another guy joined us, and then at that time we were working in my apartment. I then moved to New York City, so I was living
Yeah.
in the village with my brother, and
Uh-huh.
then at that time I had 3 employees. So we had imagine we had an apartment in East Village, 2 apartment, super small, and we
Mhm.
had 3 full-time employees working in my apartment every single day for a year and a half. And
Yeah.
at the same time, we were interviewing
Brilliant.
maids in my like small living room. So like in a couch of 3, we had like 3 to 4 maids interviewing to sort of
Yeah.
do the cleaning, right? Because if you
Yeah.
like if people know cleaning space, it's like it's a
Yeah.
very high turnover. So you need like
Right.
tons
Yeah.
and tons of
Volume.
we're interviewing people
Yeah.
every single week just because.
Absolutely. Mm.
But yeah, so that was like crazy, just learning all that stuff, interviewing, firing, like firing people was a weird thing to me. Like at that
Yeah.
time, I
Yeah.
was 25, right? And I
Yeah.
was just like,
Yeah.
okay, like how do I fire somebody, right? Like how do I? And the weird, I always tell people like at least the weird thing for me was like a lot of these
Mm.
people were just much older than me. So
Mhm.
when they look at me, they're just like, oh, like you're like young, like how come you're my boss, right? It's like that weird mentality
Yeah. Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was like something like people was like, oh, what issues you ever overcome? Something you overcome. I'm like, hey, like I don't
Mm.
doesn't matter that I'm younger than you. I'm like, still need to listen to me, right? It's like
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
No, completely. No, I love it. I love all this. And do you know what I love about it the most actually is just, just having this little chat now where you're so open about the kind of journey. For me, that alone, I know this isn't the kind of main subject for today, right? But what I love about it is that there's anybody out there that's kind of like, even as an aside, what we're talking about is just even remotely, thinking about doing their own thing or is cautious or fearful or anything like that. I mean, the overarching message from me from what you're saying so far is just like, do you know what? Give it a go
yeah,
for it, And I've heard that so many times where it's great that you say that you're honest enough to say that actually, yeah, I was scared, man. But I got out there and I gave it a go, and look kind of where you are now. You didn't know that, but you had to make that step to get to that point. And I remember when I was talking to Jimmy, it's exactly the same. When he was running his hat business, he didn't know either. He
yeah,
just like carefully tested and measured the model. He made a hat. He gave it to some mates. He said, "What do you reckon?" And then obviously check that podcast out. But the story is literally he grew a multi-million business out of it, a lot like you've been doing, with the things you're doing. So I love that. I mean, very briefly, tell the guys then how Chester Travels came about and then Voy Media, just so they get a flavor for this multiple, serial entrepreneur. It's fantastic.
yeah. So basically, how Chester came out was that we were doing the maid company for a few years, and at that
Yeah,
time, we're just like thinking like any business, I tell people like you eventually just get bored or tired of doing it. And I
yeah,
just got bored and tired. I was like, I was like,
right.
what, are you doing cleaning like my whole like next few years? Right? It's honest.
Yeah,
Like it's like sometimes you just
yeah.
be honest with yourself. Like if at a while like, you just go
Mhm.
home and you're just like, oh my god, like I don't want to be doing this anymore. So then you,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
me, it's I think sometimes like founders like people are like, oh, just do it. It's making good money. I'm like, yes, I like doing it, but like
yeah,
ex-
yeah.
mentally not stimulating, right? So
Absolutely. It's not just about money, right? I mean, it's very interesting you say that because literally, I mean, I haven't released it yet, but there was another podcast with a guy from Florida who's exactly the same situation. Built a successful business, basically got bored, was looking for purpose, and ended up actually traveling, for 2 years to recalibrate and find out actually what is it? Because this isn't going to be the answer for me. This business is not the answer. Neither is it me traveling around in an RV for 2 years. Is not giving me the fulfillment. So he ended up doing multiple businesses like you're talking about. So it's very interesting that you're saying exactly the same thing.
yeah. It's yeah. So basically, you're both looking for the next thing, and at that
Yeah.
time, like FBA was a really big thing, uh,
Right.
like Amazon fulfillment by Amazon, and
Yeah.
my partner actually in the Voy Media,
Yeah. Hmm.
Wilson, was doing this himself. So he was
Right.
like traveling the world, and sort of he was also entrepreneur. He was selling like
Hmm.
online, and then he
Yeah.
was telling me, he's like, oh Kevin, like I'm doing this thing, and he's like telling me how much he's making. I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
you're making so much money, and he's like, how big is your team? And he's like, oh, it's just me, and I'm just like doing
Yeah.
like service like 3 or 4 hours a week. And I'm like, oh my god, like
Wow.
I need to like do this thing, right?
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah. So then like that's why I always think it's helpful, like at least for listeners, like to talk to other entrepreneurs or people with other ideas because
Yeah.
like I mean you probably heard it, Phil, like people are like, oh, I don't want to tell people my ideas, they're gonna steal it. I'm like, it's like you do tell people everybody your ideas, like that way they know like you're entrepreneurs and they're telling you
Yeah.
what they're doing, how they're doing things, and
Yeah.
then
Absolutely.
and so Wilson was the one that introduced
Mm.
me to this thing, and then I researched everything about it. And like
Yeah.
anything, like you're skeptical, right? Like, oh, like is this true? But then I was
Yeah.
like, hey, like I know Wilson, and like he's doing it, like I could do it too. So then
Yeah. Yeah.
that's sort of like another mentality thing I can tell people. It's like, hey, if you see someone doing it, like,
mm,
and like, you
mm,
know them, like, hey, you could do it too. Like, and
mm,
people was like, another big thing is like, there's a famous quote by Steve Jobs that like I
yeah,
always like and think about, which is like, everything
mm,
around you is made by no one so smarter than you, right? And it's like, hey, like the world is created by people just like you that just went out there and did it. So then I was like, I want to do this FBA thing, and then with Wilson's
yeah,
help, he helped me found my first product. So in between
yeah,
Chester, there was another outdoor gear company that
yeah,
we did, and then Wilson helped me found that product. So we did
yeah,
that for a year and a half, and then we learned
brilliant.
everything about FBA. Okay, what
Yeah,
mistakes
yeah,
we
yeah,
made,
yeah,
how to ship your inventory. I've
yeah,
been to China 3 times, go to the Canton Fair to talk to suppliers, and that
yeah,
sort of relationship building really helped us learn the business. And
yeah.
then we kind of learned what we wanted to do, another e-commerce company, and then
Hmm.
we learned from the outdoor gear company what mistakes we made, such as, okay,
Yeah,
this is a product that everybody had, so it's very easy to copy
yeah,
it. On
yeah,
Amazon, there's so many Me Too products
mm,
that if it's a small, they call it like a small package,
yeah,
anybody can get them where the shipping's pretty cheap. So and also the value is like less than $60, which is kind of like
yeah,
a good starter for anybody. But at that time, we're just like, we need another product that's bigger, where people just can't copy you, and we also want something that's actually custom. And that's when we're realizing, oh, there's
yeah.
a luggage space that's
Wow.
building up
Yeah, yeah,
in the city. And
yeah,
then that is when we started to start thinking about a luggage company, and
mm,
we
mm,
loved it because everything else I
mm,
just said, which is a large item, meaning that it's hard to ship. So you actually need to understand how to ship things overseas, such
yeah,
as,
yeah,
through air
yeah,
freight. Not air freight is like really expensive, but like through the boat. And then
yeah,
we had the connections from our previous company, and then we
yeah,
also had the connections from our factories, where we didn't have
yeah,
to go to like Alibaba or AliExpress, where
yeah,
those prices are like 30-40% higher. We had
yeah,
our old manufacturing contact that
mm,
we were able to locate another one that just made luggages. And then
mhm,
what's great about them was that they only
mm,
spoke Chinese, so then
right,
they knew you
mm,
had to like how to weigh in order to get the best prices.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
mm,
using that experience, we
mm,
took about 6 months developing Chester.
mhm,
And what was great about that is because you needed capital to start it. So
yeah,
our
yeah,
was like about 150K just for the mold, whereas like with
wow,
our other outdoor gear company, it was like,
yeah,
hey, here's this product. Can you guys
yeah,
into it? Right? It's like, okay,
yeah,
cool, yeah, like, it's okay, yeah.
yeah,
So the barrier to entry was much higher, and that was the reason why we wanted it, because
yeah,
like you obviously
mm,
Chester didn't start in the beginning, like because we
no,
didn't have cash,
no,
we didn't have
no,
experience.
that's a very
So
good point.
yep, we had
Mm,
the stair step. I call it the stair step
mm,
approach. Like you're just like, okay,
yeah,
you do a business, you learn a little bit, next business,
yeah,
you build up
yeah,
some cash,
yeah,
next one.
yeah,
Um, and then
wow,
from Chester, basically with Chester, we started off with just our carry-on luggage.
yeah,
And the reason people was like, so now if you look at our website, chestertravels.com, we have all sizes. For the
mhm,
first 2 years, we could
mhm,
only sell carry-on because we didn't have enough money to make the other ones.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
like, yeah, I thought people were like, hey, we just didn't have enough money, right? So like,
so
uh,
cool.
yeah. So with like, if people do, obviously with e-commerce, like it's just a cash flow issue where like, okay, you
Yeah,
spend like 200K on a PO, and then
yeah,
the money is just like is like overseas on your boat. Like you're just, it's like not doing anything.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. Wow, that's
Yeah.
so amazing. I love that the way it was a step change. You know, like you started with the business, you got some cash flow, you got some capital, and then interestingly, then we're able to use that to get over a barrier to entry to perhaps to create that niche that you've now got with that brand.
Yep.
That's so clever. And I think again the message I'm getting from this is that this is a fantastic story for you, and it feels like it's really played to a lot of your strengths. And my overarching sort of thoughts on this are anybody who wants to try and do this type of thing, make it on their own, go out and, get out the boat and sort of push out the boundaries a bit. It sounds like, double down on your own life, double down on your own skills and strengths. Is it a language? Is it the world you're in? You suddenly sniff out a little niche, or you find an idea, or you're reading something like you're saying on TechCrunch or whatever, and find out what those combinations of things are in your life. And there might just be something there that pops out and goes, hold on a minute, what about that idea? And then, as you say, you don't, like Jimmy said as well, you don't go full on in, and kind of burn everything, but go in with something that's achievable and then work up.
Yep.
And it's great that you've done this. You've done this multiple times. It's fantastic. I mean, obviously, all this stuff we're talking about now is a podcast in itself, to be honest, and we should probably do that at some point. This segues really nicely, though, into the kind of meat and bones of what we were going to touch on today, which was more on the Voy Media side. Basically leaning on obviously your experience on the front line as well, on the brands that you're running. But the main thing to sort of kind of concentrate on in this particular episode was around what you're doing with Voy Media, and the overarching theme is creativity, effectively,
Mm-hmm.
and it's helping brands to, and generally brands, not retailers, but brands to optimize and accelerate their creativity using content. And I know that when I speak to retailers, I'm sure you're the same, and probably the main reason why Voy Media is in existence in the first place is that when I speak to brands, they're like, we know we're weak in content. We know we're weak in building out our content roadmaps and our fresh branding messaging. And of course, that's because they've got so much other nitty gritty core day to day stuff to do. So obviously, talking to you about what you're doing with Voy Media, having found that niche in terms of servicing that side of the business for brands, as we've said in previous episodes, an extension of their team handling that side of it. Why don't you give us a flavor for what you're doing and the demand for your services that brands are doing in terms of keeping themselves fresh, moving forward, and having the bandwidth to do this stuff with a company like Voy Media?
Yeah. So with Voy Media, kind of something that we've noticed was with Voy Media, we were helping brands with Facebook ads and sort of, essentially just marketing online. And I tell people nowadays, like Facebook ads are just getting easier and easier to do. Like Facebook's making it so easy to
Mm-hmm.
in a budget and then get sales.
Yeah,
So a year ago, we were just really like doing a lot of that. Like we were turning the knobs on like the Facebook
yeah,
platform, but
yeah.
now we saw that Facebook was making all these changes that basically essentially made media buying, as in like the dials that you switch on Facebook, almost like not existing because like they just want to make it easier for small businesses.
Of
And
course.
then we saw that like any business, you have to sort of like, okay, like where's your agency headed, right? It's I always tell people like
Yeah.
you need to like be
Mm.
ahead of the curve or else like your agency's
Yeah.
gonna die.
You're
Uh,
behind it. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
so then we're like, what's actually helping the businesses and the partners that we're working with? And for us, it was all the performance creatives that we're making for them. And
Yeah.
in the beginning, a year ago, we were just taking a lot of their content and making it like direct response,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about how it's going to get a user's attention, how it's going to make them buy, what's the offer they're selling,
Yeah.
what's going to make them click. So we're doing a lot with just taking that content that they had. And
Yeah.
then we realized, oh, wow, like we're seeing like patterns, we're seeing things in here that we want these brands to make, but they
Mm-hmm.
just don't have the time or capability. Like, hey, look, we need can you write a new hook for us to use in the ad? And they're like, okay, we'll do it in a week or two. And then they would
Mm-hmm.
never do it. So then we would just
Yeah.
start doing it
That's right.
ourselves. And I tell people like we started doing it ourselves because with performance went down, that means that they would be like, hey guys, you guys are bad. We're like, no, like we told you we need a new creative, like
Yeah.
to sort of
Yeah.
put it in the system. So then
That's
we're
right.
just like started doing our stuff ourselves because like
Mm.
we're realizing that like, hey, if we can do the creatives and that actual output and all the editing and put in the ad, the clients are happy. All they need to know now is just sort of what you're doing and sort of the style and make sure they're finding brand guidelines. So that's kind of like how we transition to this sort of new creative sort of approach to running our agency where uh, if a brand that's scaling, we are realizing that they just need help with the creative output, and then we're using that to sort of break down to what pieces or components they need, and really kind of here for Voy Media, we think about it like AIDA, like AIDA, which is like
Yeah.
attention, interest, desire, and action. And that's sort of how we break down a video or creative script for a brand that we're working with that's sort of scaling up. But yeah, that's kind of like how, and that sort of like led us to,
Yeah.
that led us to doing kind of owning that sort of space of content creation for the brands we
Yeah.
work with. And then now when they come to us, this is like our USP saying, hey, we know you need help with creatives
Yeah.
and we know that you're strapped for time. We're going to be taking that over for you and you're going to get input into sort of what we're making and how we're making it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're going to say, hey, it's going to be cost effective
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
obviously we can produce all the content. We're based in New York City, but we
Yeah.
had a director, creative coordinator that lives in Slovenia, and we've been able to build out a studio there to keep things cheap. So now customers just
Yeah.
need to mail the products to Slovenia, and then we're hiring all the actors there. We're hiring all the studio
Wow.
there, equipment's
That's
there.
amazing. So what?
Much-
So is this going? Is this sort of video that you're kind of almost planning with the brand, and then you're going away and producing the films or the scripts or the viral stuff or whatever, and then putting it to YouTube and everything else? So what does it look like? What does this content? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what it looks like is, so we'll tell brands like we'll come up with concepts. Like, hey, these are
Yeah.
3-4 concepts that we want to sort of hit depending on the angles, right? So let's say you want to do like a big one I see a lot of brands making right now, and that we're doing too, is like comparison angles, like your brand versus another brand, right? So then we'll present to the client this sort of video concept for them, where for example, let's say you're selling soap online, right? Let's say like,
Yeah.
hey, here's this soap company, and here's
Uh-huh.
another one, and
Yeah.
we'll just present like how we're going to present it in a way where you're repositioning the other brand, but also positioning yourself in a better light. And then like that could be
Yeah.
through soap tests, like
Yeah.
maybe,
Okay.
yeah, stuff like that, right? So we'll say like, hey, this is the concept,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
we'll be like, okay, great, and then we'll be like, okay, you need one actor, and then
Yeah.
this is a simple video. We really need one actor, and then like a
Yeah.
table. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Yeah, so like a lot of these concepts, we're not like making. We tell them we're not making movies. We want stuff that sells, right?
Yeah. 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 Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So that's sort of like how and then basically when we do this sort of video concept, we'll say then, like we know for Facebook, for example, that the first 3 seconds are the most important. So when we'll do a hook for that, we'll shoot 3 to 4 different hooks. That way, when post editing, we can then chop it up into many segments that we can then test on Facebook. Because obviously, that first hook that we think might work might not work. So then we just want to keep shooting more and more if we're already there for the day shoot. That way, the clients know that we're testing. For us, it's about testing multiple things. So then it goes into that sort of ADA concept where each video is split into like 4 segments. So then for each segment, we'll at least shoot 3 to 4 different versions of it. That way we can post production, we can make like a ton of videos.
Yeah. Yeah. And does that all go into Facebook, or does it go into all sorts of other channels? Socially, website, blogs, YouTube, you name it. Where do you distribute this information? How does it get out there, if you like?
Yep. So once we sort of do the post production, we'll usually run it on Facebook ads, such as Instagram, and then we'll make for like the 1x1 for Instagram, the 1x1 for Facebook, but also the vertical ones, the 16x9 for like Instagram stories and Facebook stories.
Okay, cool.
And then again, we'll also put it on YouTube, because YouTube is like, so these videos are more for like ads, but brands can use them for like their social media if they want. But really for us, we want to be able to push paid traffic behind them to see if they're going to work or not, because we want to know within 2 or 3 days, is this going to give us the return that we're looking for?
That's very interesting. So is this something that a lot of people are doing in terms of creative agency support for brands? Are you quite unique in doing that? Have you found, like you were saying earlier, have you found a niche for this and you're kind of capitalizing on that?
Yeah, so for at the moment, we're like one of like a few ones that do this, where we're combining the paid with the creative performance all in one. Where before we were working with like creative agencies that just did the creative, and those are great, but we found out that we didn't know, they themselves didn't know if stuff was good because they never saw the data and the results. Where for us, we're looking at the data in Facebook platform and seeing the video, and then we're saying, hey, this video is actually working. Let's make more of this video.
Wow. So you're starting to, we're going now back into data, aren't we? We're going back into how do you prove what you're doing is working, how to make informed decisions on what you're doing going forward. So not only have you got the resources and the creative to take the weight off their team because they're busy doing other stuff, you've then also got the ROI on it. And then you've got almost the navigation in terms of what they should be focusing on and getting the best out of for this area, which is just bang on, isn't it? Because it's exactly what we have to do, with the insights we get off the back of personalization. It's nothing if you can't tell people, or they can't show themselves whether things are working, what new things they should do, whether it's products that are actually having a lot of paid media behind them, paid budget behind them, but aren't actually converting. You've got to know that in a snapshot. You've got to know your rock stars. You've got to know the ones that are being seen and not converted because you're wasting your time and placement. You've got to do something else with them. So it's great that there's another thread now on this importance of data, which keeps coming up time and time again.
Yeah, and exactly. It's. I think I'm seeing it more and more where every brand is going online, and it's definitely about having a great creative, but making sure that creative performs, because we say like creative means nothing if there's no sales, right? And back in the day, that was a thing that like people couldn't measure. Where right now with platforms such as Facebook, Google Ads, Facebook Ads, you can measure everything. So why not?
Is it easy to measure it, like literally just out of those platforms, or do you have to do anything clever in terms of, I don't know, investing in some sort of platform to understand that data? Is it all just there for you to see?
We mainly use the Facebook. Facebook has a lot of metrics for videos, like first 3-second views. They have 40% views, click-through rates, and then ROAS. So what we do is we pull all that data into like a data studio report, and then we will tie that to a creative. And then based on like the data internally, we have like metrics that we know, okay, their attention's less than this, that means it was bad. So then we'll send that to the creative team saying, hey, look, this
Yeah.
hook that you guys made is bad. We need another one for this week.
Okay. So do you A/B test and stuff as well? I mean, how do you know what, I mean, do you put work and effort into saying, well, what type of message goes to what type of segment? I mean, a lot of the stuff that's in our world, does that cross over into your world as well?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So we'll think
Okay.
about like let's say we're doing like a fishing audience, right? And then like
Yeah.
working out audience. And yeah, that messaging will be very different. So we'll be A/B
Yeah.
testing like segments and audiences depending on like, what the product is. And then sometimes
Yeah.
we'll A/B test just to sort of try to enter a new niche, right? So let's say the product isn't
Yeah.
necessarily fishing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try some fishing creatives to see can we
Mm.
penetrate the market because we just need more customers, right? So then
Yeah.
yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like no, actually. I mean, what do you find in terms of the type of company that gets the most value out of what you're doing, in terms of like being an extension of their team, being heavily reliant on content, or they want to be more reliant on content? And where's the sweet spot for the brand that would really get the most out of what you do from your side?
Usually brands that will get the most out of us are ones that like know the product, they have product market fit, we call it, which is like, hey, this is an
Right.
item that people want that
Hmm.
they're selling initially, and it's definitely not for brand owners that don't know if people want to buy the product yet, or they just like haven't
Yeah.
spent the money or time. Usually, like
Yeah.
we
I got
would
it.
look for other stuff such as like, do they have like a marketing director or digital marketing manager? Because
Yeah.
it's makes it much easier for them to understand like their core metrics, and of course, other things we
Yeah.
look at are just like, do
Yeah.
they know their lifetime value? Do they know their
Mm.
AOV? Stuff like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
know that stuff, then you're
Yeah.
probably a better fit for us because
Yeah.
you can understand the core of marketing, and it's not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
feel like you spent $100. It's like, hey, how come I didn't get any results back? I'm like, okay,
Yeah, yeah. No,
like
completely. No, I get it. And we're the same in many ways, actually. I mean, when we talk to companies, when we talk to brands, it's often actually more important for a brand that we talk to that's already got a solution, ironically. You might think, oh, somebody's got Nosto, somebody's got Rich Relevance, somebody's got Fresh Relevance, whatever it might be. And think, oh, no, they've got a solution. Oh, no, we've got to try and dislodge them, blah, 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 etc. We actually welcome that because we know that the only real way to get the next marginal gain or the next element of improvement in that area is to say to a brand that you already know what personalization is. You know what you're trying to get, but there is always a dial that can be tweaked here.
Mhm.
And so when you know as a brand how important personalization is, how important it is to get the right products in front of the right people at the right time in lightning speed fashion to get that conversion in the moment, then they say, actually, Segmentify, you're telling me that you can do it better than what we've got. And we're like, well, yeah. And they say, well, of course, the argument's going to be, we'll prove it. Well, of course, that's what we want to prove it. So we welcome that because what we will do is a free split test or a free proof of concept over let's say a 14-day period for that exact reason. How on earth should we expect anybody to spend any money on Segmentify unless we've proven that we can either improve on a current provider who's already doing what we
Mhm.
do? But if we're saying we can do it better, we've got to put the money where the mouth is, and we've got to show them, which is what we do see countless times, and make sure that we don't do any kind of we don't put any barriers in place either. So,
Yep.
for example, nobody now in this day and age wants to be tied into a lengthy contract.
Nope.
Nobody wants to be, have their price suddenly change on them, because ultimately, what we get is, because the team is constantly tweaking and developing and optimizing the platform, a bit like what you were saying earlier around the way that before we started chatting about how you're an extension to the team, how you work with your brands for a long period of time because you're getting to know the brand and then you're working out ways to optimize how to market them. We're the same. We work on an ongoing basis with our customers to make sure that every single marginal gain in terms of best practice of driving those metrics up is done by our team. And how and having it within a 30-day monthly rolling contract means that if we're not on it all the time, there's a risk. And so there's a real proactiveness in the team that enables us to continue driving this forward. So I completely understand that that kind of target of company that really needs that sort of next level of content creation and brand awareness, is very similar to the kind of brands that we talk to as well.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Like when a brand is problem aware, its
Mm.
solution is so much.
Yeah, Yeah. No,
Yes.
absolutely.
Our When you have to educate the user on like what like a creative is, then you're like, okay, like and then you
Yeah.
have an issue. It's like,
No, completely,
yeah.
completely. And I mean, everyone's obviously got their stages in their journey, and we know that there'll be brands that are in that stage of just,
Mhm.
content is just not there yet.
Yep.
We're still getting the nuts and bolts together. Same as personalization, there might be
Yeah.
something where it's just not on the radar yet. There's too many other bigger things to kind of do before, but it's just great to know, where the different solutions sit on the kind of spectrum.
Yeah, but and even for me, like as a business owner, like as I spend more money and make more money, you just like don't want to be. You want to work with someone that is an expert. You don't want to be thinking about these things like
Yeah,
so. And
yeah, absolutely.
in the beginning, obviously, like you said before, like when you bootstrap, you're trying to like squeeze every dollar, to like the
Yeah,
max. But as you're
yeah,
making more money, you're just like, I don't want to think about it. Let me go hire experts such as you guys, like Segmentify, to run this for me because I know they're good. So and
yeah,
they're
yeah,
doing a good job. So
yeah,
yeah, I think it's like obviously
yeah.
as you get bigger, you sort of
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we do have loads of conversations around the content side as well, interestingly. And again, a lot of brands I talk to. In fact, I was just talking to a company this morning, one of our customers, and I asked the question about content, and they know it's important, because they are differentiating through, for example, sustainable, ethnicity, ethical type products, and serving different segments in a different way. And like you were saying earlier, the only way you can do that really is by really getting that content right, so that it's reflecting and building trust with each and every segment that you know about. And so I was talking about shoppable content, for example, where you might have a blog and it's talking about a new range. There's a couple of things you might want to do. You might want to actually serve up, a widget of product recommendations within a blog that then obviously, neatens up that customer journey. Should it be looking at a certain product, they can then go and buy it direct from that blog. Or whether it's actually serving a different segment, a different page entirely. Built with a tool like Styler, where there's an integration, and then you can obviously, whip up different content pages for different segments, and then send obviously different segments different products, and actually a different look and feel of the entire page if you want, very, very swiftly. So it's very, very important area, but like you say, there is a journey to be had in terms of when that can be deployed. But products like Styler, companies like Voy Media, platforms like Segmentify are trying to make it more accessible to be able to do that, because you're an extension of their team, and it's very quick to do this stuff. So I think it's very interesting to hear what you're doing, Kevin.
yeah, we're for us we're here to sort of like we've been working with brands that like are big companies and like we work with like obviously people know a big brand that we work with right now that we're doing all their marketing and sort of like all this is like Lacoste.
Mm,
We run
mm.
all their stuff for paid, and this is exactly what we're doing, right? So
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's been a fantastic chat. I love all of the entrepreneurial stuff that we talked about, and obviously, I love to hear what's going on in the terms of this creative, and how important it is, and how you found that niche in terms of helping brands to keep fresh and expand their awareness in a speedy way, with an extra part of their team. If the guys are interested in talking to you about any of the stuff they've heard today about your journey, yourself, anything to do with the business side, and also obviously to do with the travel side, and the maid sailor side, and also obviously the Voy Media side, what's the
yeah.
best way for them to look you up?
The best way is I'm always on LinkedIn. That's probably I think
Yeah,
feel like you're connected. But
yeah,
LinkedIn is a great spot, and then just Kevin at Voy Media, VoyMedia.com.
yeah.
I get a lot of just email me there with like the
Awesome.
podcast schedule. So that's a great way
Yeah,
to
yeah.
me. Yeah.
Fantastic. Nice one. Thank you, Kevin. And I love to ask this. My sort of final closing question for you really is, out of all the stuff that we've talked today, which has been like really great, why don't you just kind of pick one thing for the guys to go away with, a sort of a golden nugget of information that they can take away from today's chat?
I think the way that people need to think about it is it's like creativity is we
Yeah,
talk about creativity as in the videos being creative, but just kind of we're talking before, like you're creative in your own way. That could be
yeah,
the
yeah,
way you start your business, the way you're sort of organizing your furniture. Like there's so much creativity that you just need to
yeah,
think about
yeah,
and use that to your advantage. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
people back then were like, oh, like I'm not creative type. My background's computer science, but I'm doing videos creative now. Like
yeah,
um,
yeah,
so it's I think everybody's creative in a way. You just need to untap it or unlock it. And really, for
yeah,
at least for us,
yeah,
we have a really good creative director that it just makes it welcoming to talk about these ideas, and it's like very therapeutic in a way of just sharing stuff. And that's what I love about this sort of media buying plus creative because you can
yeah,
actually test these things out and see, hey, this creative concept works. So, but in general, I tell people like everybody's creative. You just gotta unlock it.
I love that. I love that. It's just a message to say, hey, let's embrace creativity in whatever guise it comes out, right?
Exactly.
That's fantastic. Anyway, thank you so much, Kevin, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon about some extra topics and so on that I've loved today, and I hope the listeners have enjoyed listening to it as well. So it just remains me to say thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And if you haven't done so already, pop over to segmentify.com/podcast to get all the podcasts that are there, including Kevin's will be there shortly. And leave a review on Apple Player if that's how you like to listen, or follow us on Spotify, whatever works for you. And if you have any questions or want to be involved, or there's any topics you want us to cover, email me anytime at phil@segmentify.com. Thanks so much again, everyone. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. And we look forward to speaking to you guys again soon.
Put us to the test and let us prove we can drive more revenue for you. Sign up for a completely free proof of concept or split test against your current provider, set up and optimized by our team within a few days at segmentify.com/demo.